still remember the exact moment my life changed. It started with a phone call, not a dramatic one, not an emergency, just an ordinary evening call to my daughter. My name is Sarah, and that night I was standing in my kitchen with an old landline phone in my hand, the kind with big plastic buttons and a long spiral cord. I called my daughter Lily almost every evening. It had become our little routine. Lily was married to a good man named Edic, and they had 2 children. Life with small kids could be exhausting, so I liked to check on her, just to ask the same simple question. How are you, my girl? That evening, I picked up the phone and dialed her number the way I always did. My fingers moved almost automatically. One number, then another, then another. But without realizing it, I pressed one wrong digit. I didn't notice. The phone began to ring. 1 ring, 2 rings. Then someone answered. Hello. I smiled immediately. Hi, sweetheart, how are you? There was a short pause. Then the young woman on the other end said carefully, Hello, can you hear me? I frowned a little. Of course I can hear you. Lily, what's wrong? Another pause. Then the voice replied, I'm sorry, who is this? I laughed softly. Who is it? It's your mother. On the other end of the line, everything went quiet. The young woman holding the phone was not Lily. Her name was Jenny. But at that moment, I had no idea, and she didn't know what to say either. Finally, she spoke again, slowly, confused. Mom, I didn't notice anything strange. I continued speaking warmly, just like I always did. So tell me, how are you? What are you doing? I heard her sigh, a tired sigh, the usual kids all day. Cooking, cleaning, I'm exhausted. Something in her voice made my heart tighten. So I said the same thing I often told my daughter. Don't worry, I'll come over. I'll help you cook dinner, watch the kids, and we'll wait for Edic together. The silence that followed felt different, longer. Then the woman said something that stopped me cold. My husband's name isn't Edic. I blinked. What? It's Christopher. That was the moment. I slowly pulled the phone away from my ear and looked at the number I had dialed. And that's when I realized something. I had made a mistake. 1 single digit. I had just called a complete stranger. I took a small breath. I'm so sorry. I think I dialed the wrong number. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. Then the young woman asked quietly, So you're not coming? For a few seconds, after she asked that question, neither of us spoke. So you're not coming? Her voice was quiet, almost embarrassed, as if she regretted asking the moment the words left her mouth. I stood there in my kitchen, holding the phone, staring at the wall. I could hear children in the background. One of them was crying. Another one was shouting something. And somewhere, a pot lid clattered against the stove. The young woman on the phone spoke again. I'm sorry, that was silly of me. You don't even know me. Something about that sentence stayed with me. I asked gently, "What's your name?" "Jenny." "And how old are you, Jenny?" "I'm 25." 25. The same age my daughter Lily had been not so long ago. I hesitated for a moment, then asked another question. "Jenny, where is your mother?" The silence on the line felt heavier this time. Then she answered, "She died last year." Her voice cracked slightly, and suddenly everything made sense. Why she had said, "Mom," why she sounded so tired, why that simple question, "How are you, my girl?" had affected her so deeply. Jenny continued quietly, "Sometimes I still expect her to call me." I closed my eyes. At that moment, I imagined her. A small apartment, 3 little kids running around, a young mother standing alone in the kitchen. No help, no one asking how she was doing. I suddenly thought of my own daughter Lily. There had been many evenings when Lily had called me and said, "Mom, can you come over? I'm overwhelmed." And I always went. But tonight, the voice asking for help belonged to a stranger. Still holding the phone, I asked, "How many children do you have?" "3. 3." For a moment, I didn't say anything. Then Jenny spoke again, almost whispering, "You must think I'm strange." "No," I said quietly. "I don't." I looked at the clock on my kitchen wall. It was just after 6. Then I asked her one simple question. "Jenny, do you live far from Maple Street?" "No, why?" I took a slow breath. "Because that's where I am." She sounded confused. "Okay." I smiled a little. "Then give me your address." Another long pause. "Why?" I answered simply. "Because I said I'd come help." She almost laughed. "But you don't even know me." "That's true." "Then why would you come?" For a moment, I thought about it. And then I told her the truth. Because sometimes a mother should show up. About 30 minutes later, I was walking down a quiet street carrying a small grocery bag. Inside were a few simple things: bread, milk, and a pack of cookies for the kids. I wasn't even sure why I bought them. Maybe because when you visit a house with children, you never arrive empty-handed. The building Jenny had described was an old 5-story apartment block, the kind that had probably stood there for 40 years. The hallway smelled faintly like soup and old paint. I climbed the stairs slowly until I reached the 3rd floor. Then I stopped in front of apartment 34. For a moment, I hesitated. I remember thinking to myself, "Sarah, what exactly are you doing?" I had just walked across the neighborhood to visit a woman I had never met, all because of a phone call. But something inside me kept saying the same thing. "Knock." So I did. A few seconds later, I heard footsteps. The door opened slowly, and there she was, Jenny. She looked even younger than I expected. Her hair was tied up in a messy bun. There was flour on her hands, and behind her legs, 3 little faces were peeking out curiously. The children were staring at me like I was some mysterious visitor. For a moment, none of us spoke. Then Jenny said softly, "You really came." I smiled. Of course I did. Her eyes suddenly filled with tears. She quickly wiped them away, embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I just didn't think anyone would actually come." I gently lifted the grocery bag. I also brought reinforcements. Jenny looked inside the bag. When she saw the cookies, she laughed through her tears. "Oh no, now they'll love you forever." Right on cue, one of the kids stepped forward, a little boy with messy hair. "Are those cookies?" I knelt down and smiled. "They might be." 3 pairs of eyes lit up immediately. Jenny shook her head and stepped aside. "Well, you'd better come in before they start a rebellion." I walked into the apartment, and instantly I understood everything I had heard on the phone. Toys were scattered everywhere. A pot was boiling on the stove. One child was crying. Another was trying to climb onto a chair. And the third was already reaching for the cookies. It wasn't chaos exactly. It was something else. It was life. Busy, loud, overwhelming. Jenny sighed and said quietly, "This is what my days look like." I put my coat on the chair and rolled up my sleeves. "Well," I said with a small smile, "then let's start with the soup before it escapes." For the first time that evening, Jenny laughed, and that's when everything began to change. Within minutes, the kitchen felt completely different. The soup stopped boiling over. The kids were sitting at the table eating cookies, and Jenny was finally able to sit down for the first time that evening. I moved around the kitchen almost automatically, stirring the pot, cutting bread, wiping the counter. It reminded me of all the years I had spent doing the same thing for my own daughter, Lily, when her children were small. Jenny watched me quietly. After a moment, she said, "I still can't believe this is happening." I looked over at her and smiled. "Neither can I." One of the kids suddenly tugged on my sleeve. A little girl with big, curious eyes. "Are you a grandma?" Jenny quickly said, "Oh no, sweetheart, she's just." But I gently interrupted. "Well, tonight I can be." The little girl seemed perfectly satisfied with that answer. She grinned and ran back to the table. A few minutes later, we heard the sound of a key turning in the door. Jenny looked up. "That's Christopher." The door opened. A tall man stepped inside, carrying a work bag. He looked tired, like someone who had just finished a long shift. He closed the door behind him, took off his jacket, and then froze, because standing in the kitchen was a woman he had never seen before. Me. He looked at Jenny, then back at me, then at the kids calmly eating cookies. His expression was a mix of confusion and suspicion. "Jenny." She stood up quickly. "It's okay." He frowned slightly. "Okay, but who is she?" I turned and gave him a polite smile. "Good evening." Christopher blinked. "Do we know each other?" Jenny rubbed her forehead. "You're going to think this sounds insane." He crossed his arms. Try me. She took a deep breath. Today, a woman called our house. Christopher nodded slowly. Okay. She meant to call her daughter. Okay. But she dialed the wrong number. He looked at me, then back at Jenny. And Jenny gestured toward me. She thought I was her daughter. Christopher stared for a second, then said slowly, "And she's here because of that." I raised my hand slightly. Guilty. For a moment, he just looked at both of us. Then suddenly, he started laughing. Not a small laugh, a real tired laugh that filled the room. Well, he said finally, shaking his head, I guess that explains the cookies. The tension in the room disappeared instantly. Christopher walked over and offered his hand. I'm Christopher. I shook it. Sarah. He looked around the kitchen. You cooked dinner too. Just helped. He smiled warmly. Then you're welcome here anytime. Jenny looked at him in surprise. Really? Christopher shrugged. If someone shows up to help with 3 kids and dinner, you don't question it. I liked him immediately. That night, we all ate dinner together, just like a normal family. And none of us knew it yet. But that strange evening was only the beginning. After that night, something unexpected happened. I came back. At first, it was just once a week. Sometimes I brought soup, sometimes bread, sometimes just myself. Jenny never asked for help, but I could see in her eyes how much it meant when someone walked through that door and said, "How are you doing today?" The children got used to me quickly. Kids always do. One afternoon, the little girl walked up to me while I was helping in the kitchen and asked, "Are you our grandma?" Jenny immediately looked embarrassed. "Oh, sweetheart, you shouldn't." But I smiled and said gently, "Well, I suppose I could be." From that moment on, I became Grandma Sarah. Not officially, but in their hearts. Christopher accepted it surprisingly easily. One evening, he told Jenny something I will never forget. You know, maybe your mom sent her. Jenny asked, "What do you mean?" Christopher shrugged. I mean, maybe somewhere out there your mother saw you struggling and made sure someone showed up. None of us ever argued with that idea. Life slowly settled into a rhythm. Birthdays, school days, family dinners, Christmas, and somehow, without anyone formally deciding it, I became part of their family. Not by blood, but by choice. Years passed. The kids grew up. The little girl who once asked if I was their grandma went to college. The boys got jobs and started building their own lives. And through all those years, I kept calling my real daughter Lily every evening. But now there was another number in my phone. Jenny's. Almost 20 years after that first phone call, we all gathered in Jenny's house for dinner. The table was full. Christopher, Jenny, their grown children, my daughter Lily, and her husband Edic, 2 families that had somehow become one. There was a cake on the table, because that night was my birthday. I had just turned 71. Jenny stood up with a glass in her hand. I want to say something. Everyone became quiet. She looked at me. You remember the first time we spoke? I laughed. The wrong number. She shook her head gently. No. She looked around the room at everyone sitting at the table. All of this started with that phone call. Her voice softened. That day I was exhausted and lonely. She took my hand, and I heard someone say the words I hadn't heard in a long time. How are you, my girl? Her eyes filled with tears. You thought you were calling Lily. I nodded. I did. Jenny smiled through her tears. But you didn't make a mistake. The room was completely quiet now. She squeezed my hand and said softly, You just found another daughter. I felt my eyes burn. I looked around the table, at the children who had grown up, at Jenny, at the life that somehow appeared out of nowhere, all because of one small accident, one wrong digit. I laughed quietly and said, Well, I guess sometimes the wrong number. I paused, then finished the sentence. Is exactly the right one.